Hi everybody, my name is Simone Langhans and I'm a Marie Curie Fellow of the Saber Cultural project, currently hosted by BC3, the Basque Center for Climate Change in Bilbao. Saber Cultural investigates how cultural values people relate to freshwater systems such as rivers, lakes and wetlands can be weaved together with traditionally used ecological and economic values to co-create freshwater management plans with community buy-in. To do so, which means using plural values instead of singular ones, as it has been done traditionally, will help concurrently safeguard aquatic biodiversity and ecosystem services we receive from freshwater systems. Such new approaches, like the one I develop and test with my research, are much needed since freshwater systems are among the most threatened ecosystems on the planet. This not only causes problems for organisms living in freshwater systems, which are not surprisingly declining more rapidly and severely than in other realms, but it also leads to severe losses in various aspects of human well-being. I have spent the first 2 years of my fellowship at the University of Otago in Dunedin in New Zealand, during which I have worked with 2 local communities to co-develop management plans for their local freshwater systems, using a structured decision support approach based on multi-criteria analysis. I have chosen New Zealand for Saber Cultural because in New Zealand community engagement has a long history in environmental planning, conservation and management, which means that management approaches are much more bottom-up driven compared to the top-down driven processes which we have here in Europe. Also, freshwater health plays a very important role for Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand. The Maori worldview acknowledges the interconnectedness of all living things, their dependence on each other, and the links between the life-supporting capacity of healthy ecosystems and people's well-being. So, in a nutshell, with Saber Cultural, I'm investigating how freshwater biodiversity and ecosystem services can be safeguarded by integrating cultural values in freshwater management, thereby learning from Aotearoa, New Zealand. So, since we have been working at home and still are working at home, I have prepared a couple of slides to show you some of the research and the research results from the last 2 years in New Zealand. So in this slide, I show you the approach I'm using, the multi-criteria decision analysis, MCDA approach, which basically is just a range of theories and a tool which separates the decision-making process into transparent, manageable steps. Because usually if you have different stakeholders involved in the decision-making process, those stakeholders might have conflicting objectives, which makes these kind of processes quite complex. So this infographic basically just shows the different steps from A to K, and we use these infographics to work together with the communities. It just makes it a lot easier to communicate the quite complex process to the people we work with. As I have mentioned, I have been working with 2 local communities in New Zealand, and I'm going to show you one example of those 2, Lake Wanaka. So the Wanaka community I worked with, we are down here on the South Island of New Zealand, and Wanaka is located on the west coast. You can see the Lake Wanaka with the upper catchment and 2 photographs of the lake. So the community was basically just quite concerned about the water quality of the lake and the upper catchment and the increasing threats and pressures on their freshwater systems. And therefore, they were quite happy to work with me and use my MCDA approach to co-develop a management plan for the lake and the upper catchment. So first of all, I had a couple of workshops, community workshops in Wanaka, where we invited the whole community. We collected or identified the values they relate to the lake and the upper catchment, and we kind of clustered them, which you can see here in this picture. In the next step, I created a so-called objectives hierarchy. That means we're just going for a main goal and separating in more broad goals, and further separating the broad goals in more specific goals based on the values we have collected from the community. In the next step, I identified an attribute for each of the objectives, so a measurable system property that allows to assess the fulfillment, how much we fulfill each of the identified objectives. And I also quantified the value preferences either from experts or the stakeholders in so-called value functions, which you can see here, some of them, as I have identified them for all of the attributes. I have also identified how the different main stakeholder groups that were relevant or are relevant in Wanaka, how much the different stakeholders weight the different goals. So that gives you kind of an idea how different people's preferences in an area are. Finally, I have put all of that information together in an R package, and I programmed a couple of scripts. And so these are some of the outputs I got from that study. Here you can see we can calculate the current status of the system with all the different objectives showing the different quality classes from bad to excellent, and also the overall value we calculated for the catchment management plan. What I also was able to do to calculate values and the status of the objectives for potential management actions, which you can see here, action 1 to 5, and that calculating these actions or the values of these actions allows then to produce a ranking of potential management actions, which one would be most beneficial to implement in the area. Okay, I hope I could have shown you a little bit about my research, and if you're more interested to find out more and more details, you can go to my website where you can find more information. Kia ora, thank you for listening, and bye.